and she was telling us about this show. It's called like Naked Attraction. Have you guys heard of this? It's
My
a game
wife
show.
has watched it. It's in England or something? It's British or English?
Yes. So Katie has watched it, and it's a British show. It's called Sylvia. This is your homework assignment, but you're going to be very upset at me. You need to watch this. It's Naked Attraction. And so the first round was was a guy who was picking a woman, and all you see is neck down naked.
No.
That's it. You see all of their parts. And then he asked them questions. And then they flopped. And then there were men that were being chosen. Flopped.
They flopped. Can you just have like a
slight pun intended?
Okay.
They zoomed in on all of this genitalia.
No.
And like, that's how they chose their person. And
No.
I can't unsee this. I just didn't get it. But Ted, what did your wife think of it?
The problem with watching it is sometimes the kids pop out.
Oh, can we now talk about popping out, things popping out and flopping? What is wrong with you two?
The Hollow Bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast. I'm Kristen Zeman, and I am here with my... Gosh, what word do I have for you today, Sylvia?
I'm not sure. Just
You're
let
glowing.
it come out naturally.
Yeah, you're glowing. So, gosh, I have to go back to effervescent.
Okay.
Effervescent.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the word I'm going to go with you today. You look great today with that crisp white shirt on. Oh, my effervescent co-host, Sylvia Moyer. Hi, Sil. How are you today?
Hi, Kristen Zeman. I'm delicious. I'm excited. I just came off of a little aloha. So I've got some super Hawaiian kind of vibe going on. Yeah, how are you?
Is that why you're glowing?
Perhaps.
That must be why you're glowing.
Do tell
Okay,
us
yeah,
why
I'm
you're
good.
glowing.
I am on a beach resort in South Florida. And so, yeah, life is good. I'm looking out the window and I literally on the beach. So I have no complaints whatsoever. None.
I
Grateful.
love it all. I mean, there's the only complaint you might have is telling Taylor Swift she's not on our podcast because you kicked her ass out for our guest.
So listeners, welcome again to the Hollow Bunny podcast. As you guys know, this podcast is for anyone interested in talking about life and leadership, particularly the lessons that we have learned about both. And these lessons fill what we call the metaphorical hollow bunny. And Sil, I want you to tell us who is filling our bunny today.
You, Kristen Zeman, and our millions of listeners are not going to believe who we landed. Now, we landed Sunny Lee-Goodman. So who is Sunny Lee-Goodman? She's the lead consultant for inclusion and diversity with Lapin Consulting International. You may think that Taylor Swift is a catch, but we kicked Taylor Swift off to get Sunny. Sunny has over 25 years of experience. She's passionate about developing inclusive leaders who not only inspire folks, but bring out the best in their teams. I could go on and on. She is an amazing person and came into my field of view when she was the first graduate of the California Peace Officer Standards and Training Supervisory Leadership Institute as a civilian. And then she became a facilitator. She was in charge of and ran the Museum of Tolerance and the Tools for Tolerance in LA, which is a remarkable place she's going to talk about. I could talk a lot about the impact that Sunny has had, not only in California, but across the globe. But I think it's good to just put a bow on this and say that she is certified in a whole bunch of badassery, some amazing stuff in terms of transforming conflict and next stage facilitation and a whole bunch of stuff. She's a graduate of the University of California, San Diego. And I think we just cut to it. What do you think? Is that enough texture?
Sunny. Oh my gosh. I cannot believe that we have not crossed paths before. Like you said, I am so grateful that you accepted the invitation to be here. And I cannot wait to delve into our interrogation with you.
All right.
Buckle up.
Our interrogate. Come on, sister. Well, Sunny, having, some Hawaiian blood that I have and having come back from Hawaii and really sitting with first responders as they grapple with the unique challenges of the islands. I was really struck by how that kind of butts up right against us talking about inclusion and diversity and inspiration and this amazing thing they say in the islands. And I'll ask you, share story. We want to share story with you. So tell us kind of what drew you to this work and kind of give us, our readers, a nibble to kind of get a vibe of Sunny Lee-Goodman.
Well, geez, it was, first of all, I want to have the kind of life you all have where you get to be on the beach or come back from the beach. So I am aspiring to be like you all.
And I'm drinking coffee and Kristen's drinking tequila. Which would you pick? Come on.
Yeah, coffee in the morning, tequila in the afternoon.
She's
That's
both
right.
ways, Kristen.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
See?
I'm very inclusive.
You're
A true professional.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So a little bit about how I got here. I mean, in some ways, it really is a fluke. I was in graduate school at UCLA in a PhD program in history and saw this job opening at the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. They were probably only 2 or 3 years old at that time. And it was for a diversity training for law enforcement and other professionals. So educators, we had journalists, we were just doing professional development training. And I literally had no idea what I was getting into, right? So I started off, I thought the first thing is, I know nothing about law enforcement. So what's the first thing you do? You keep your mouth shut and your ears open, right? So part of what we did was a program that utilized the museum to get people to start thinking about who they are, right? So for those of you who don't know, Museum of Tolerance is divided into 2 sections. It looks at the history of the Holocaust to see the warning signs of what can happen in a society when things go unchecked. And the other side looks at contemporary issues of bias and bigotry and prejudice. And what is my role in it? And what is my role to say something? My responsibility as a human being. And what the museum did in these training programs is it really focused on what it meant to be human as a professional, right? So who you are, what you stand for, your values, the line you're willing to draw and never cross. How do I feel about the people I work with, the people I work for, the communities in which I serve? It gave us a platform to discuss all those things, an opportunity for us to, what we like to say, elevate the role of law enforcement and help our officers and our civilian professional employees tap into the reasons they came on, right? All the good reasons, and help them manage the conflict and the obstacles that they ran into during the duration of the career. So that particular program trains all the way from recruit level to command staff. So we run programs all the way through, hopefully touching base with people during the course of their careers and addressing specific issues as they promote along.
So I have to ask, so if that is an enormous task, and to expose folks to the museum and all that is in the museum and a curriculum that helps them dive into how they show up. I mean, if you're to select some of those key lessons for people to really dive into and chew on, what are the takeaways of that public service at the MOT? What does it mean for leadership? And where there have been so many difficulties regarding race and the erosion of trust, we'll get to trust and the amazing work you do in a minute. But if you have a handful of takeaways, what would those be for us, Sunny?
Yeah, so I remember when we first proposed to do a training program for law enforcement, and there were a whole lot of skeptics. What does a museum have to do with law enforcement? It doesn't
a lot.
teach,
Come on, man.
skills. Yeah, I know. But, we're not teaching people to shoot guns or arrest people or things like that. Officers won't like it. So we did a lot of pilots.
They wouldn't like relationships and building trust, exploring, the origins of the profession and us in society. What?
Well, let's be honest. We've evolved in the 20 years 28 years since I've been working with law enforcement, there's definitely been an evolution and then a
Yeah.
recognition of that. But it didn't start there, right? We're talking about right after Rodney King, LA riots, and the resistance to anything called diversity. And let's be honest, maybe we didn't do it right either in the beginning. So
Thank
I would
you,
say,
though. Thank you for saying that, though. I actually want to. I want to pause right here because thank you for saying that there has been an evolution. Because I started in law enforcement in 1991, and what was so fascinating at that time is that there was no such thing as open mindedness, nor was there any pressure from leadership to to learn and to grow. And academics, quite frankly, were frowned upon. In fact, I remember saying, I would like to go finish my degree, and it was, man, the only degree you need, is the degree of street smarts. You just need to go to
yeah,
the school of hard knocks, kid. And I just remember that whole mindset of anti-intellectualism. And I have watched our profession become more professional over the years. And I just really am glad that you said that, because a lot of people who don't know the evolution and now, the open-mindedness, the curiosity, and the fact that, we are training for the whole person and not just, you show up and, you handle this tactical thing. So I'm grateful that you said that. And I'm actually relieved that that's also been your experience.
yeah. The other thing, you prompted me to think about how also law enforcement has opened itself up to partnerships, right? Whether it's with community and organizations like the Museum of Tolerance, or even academic like John Jay, or with people who do neuroscience work and meditative work. All of that stuff, officer wellness, right, has been influenced by external, but really embraced or starting to be embraced more and more by law enforcement today. That is a sign of professionalism. The willingness to grow and expand. That says something about law enforcement. Is it perfect? Not yet. Will it ever be? Probably not. But we're all humans in that way, right? So, but we always talk about in our world, we're looking for progress, not necessarily perfection, right? So these are, I think, the beginning of the acknowledgement that we are human beings. Remember the old saying, I leave my prejudices at the door? Because, it's like a
Yeah.
coat. I can hang out there. Well, people don't say that anymore, thank God. But it's an acknowledgement that we're human with our own set of lenses based on our experiences with the world. And we also tap into who we are in terms of our values. So Sylvia, you were asking one of the takeaways from that. You can't go through an experience like the Museum of Tolerance where you're looking at the history of the Holocaust and not ask yourself during that tour, what would I have done?
Right.
And in that question, you're asking yourself, where do I draw the line? Who am I? What do I want to stand for? That's worth articulating, right? That's
Yeah, but
worth
Sunny,
looking at.
when you ask individuals that question, they say, "Never, ever would I, follow those orders. Never would I be in
Yes.
that situation." And then what we have learned, through human behavior is, yes, you could, you would. I mean, and that kind of that parses out into law enforcement, this paramilitary organization, and the culture, of perhaps, doing things that we wouldn't normally do on an individual level, but that group think, then it puts us in those positions, and we find ourselves in situations that we wouldn't, or at least we proclaim we wouldn't do. And yet I think the lesson here is that, we're not as strong-minded as we think, and we're not as absolute as we think.
So I think that's why self-awareness is the foundation for either leadership or diversity work, this inclusion and belonging work, is to know who you are, right? Where you're standing. Put that mirror up there. At least acknowledge it, right? Because that's the place. Without self-awareness, I often talk about self-awareness in two different ways. Number one is your ability to know yourself, of course. The other side is that people don't often talk about is, how do I land for people? Are people receiving my intentions? That's self-awareness too. Because if I see people not responding to my good intentions, I shouldn't just sit there and keep doing it, right? I should be adjusting, figuring out what's not working. But all too often as leaders, we have all these. Somebody in my class the other day says, hey, I've tried this stuff and it doesn't work. And I told them, that's the problem. You see it as stuff, right? It's got to come internally. It's got to be genuine and authentic. It is not a mechanism. It's certainly not a check-off list, but something that comes from deep inside of you because you believe that it's the right thing to do.
Right. And so for all of our listeners, if you put air quotes around something and you call it stuff,
Oh, sorry.
that's like, that shit's not going to work. Air quotes means, well, someone says I'm supposed to. Come on, man. So, Sunny, I mean, you just have such an incredible depth and breadth of intellectual understanding, the academic pursuits that you've had. I want to pick apart these two things. One is you're a voracious reader, so we'll get to that in a minute. I also want to pick apart this thing that I've heard you describe, and you kind of touched on it, and it's about trust. And so we say in this profession of policing, and we're speaking to the cop listeners right now, but it could be in any really consequential realm, that the loss of life is significant and the loss of trust is just as significant. And you speak to and have exposed this idea of being trusted, trusting, and being trustworthy. So for the listeners, trusted, trusting, and trustworthy. So help us understand that and specifically give us some idea of that in this leadership arena, irrespective of where someone's serving.
Yeah, so people talk about trust as if it is one thing. I find it very helpful to kind of separate those things, right? So beginning with trustworthiness, are you worthy of somebody's trust, right? Do you live your values? Do you make difficult decisions and stick with them, even if they're not popular? Are you collaborative? Are you reliable? These are all aspects of being trustworthy. And I have found in most professions, if anyone's been through an ethical decision-making or ethics seminar, these are questions that, are part of the discussions. Trusting is, so now that I have prepared myself with my trustworthiness, right? Now I initiate this relationship. I make an invitation to others. So do you make connection with others? Here's one. Do you allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to deepen a connection?
Oh,
I
God.
know.
Oh, not the
Right?
V word. Oh, you pulled out the V word, Sunny. Oh,
I know.
so
But here,
uncomfortable.
let me make my point. You're not a robot, right? If you were a robot, you wouldn't have to worry about being vulnerable. What makes you human is your vulnerability. And human beings don't build relationships with robots. They build relationships with other humans. That's why the vulnerability piece, you have to show a little bit of yourself. You're not merely your profession, right? There's got to be part of you that you have to lower a little bit to say, I'm willing to share with you a little bit more about myself, right? And then the trusting part is really, are you making the invitation, right? Will you join me in this relationship?
So I love this, and I get into so many debates on the topic of trust, and I think that it goes hand in hand with respect. So let me, not that the two are the same, but let me use both in the same context to make this argument that is made to me, right? So whether it's trust or respect, I often ask people, hey, how do you know if you can trust someone? How do you know if you respect someone, right? And the answer I get 9 out of 10 times is they've got to earn my trust. They've got to earn my respect. And concentrating on trust here, this is a really tricky thing because, trust is one of those things that there's a risk. And when we're talking, let's just talk about focusing on relationships, and then we can take it into the context of law enforcement and building trust with community, because they most certainly, follow that same journey. But trusting is so very interesting because the risk to trusting someone is that they can break your heart. There could be some pain associated with that. And yet the only way that we know how to trust someone, this is the secret formula that I have found, wait for it, is to trust someone. You have to
Wait.
trust someone.
Wait, what?
Right.
Okay,
Exactly.
you
That's
heard
the
it here
secret formula.
first.
Okay.
This is why I mean I should be a PhD, but the only way to know if you can trust someone is to trust them. And so, but it's delicate because again, there is a risk, but and I can pause there because I think you're chomping at the bit for a retort here, but it's like it's just such a touchy thing. It's like I'm not going to trust you till you've earned my trust. Well, how do you know? And the way I say is that just like respect, how about we give it freely? How about we trust until we are proven otherwise? And then, you can take that and say, okay, you know what? That trust was broken, and I would hope that when you do trust someone or when you are vulnerable with someone, that we do that incrementally, just as the way a friendship or relationship blossoms is I give you a little piece of vulnerability, you give one back to me, I wait and see what you do with that and all of the things, but that builds trust. Yes, go.
This is why
Bring
your
it.
stupid show, Naked Attraction, you want me to watch, does not work. I don't want you to be vulnerable with all your business in front of me when we just met. Hi, I'm Sylvia, and you're naked. It's weird.
Yeah,
But-
no, it takes the mystery out of it. I don't
Okay,
like
Sunny,
it.
bring us right back to mainstream podcasting.
So, what's really interesting about what Kristen is saying is that many times people look at trust as one thing, right? So, a measure of trust is one thing. They have to earn my trust. I would challenge that because you don't make your family members earn your trust. Do you know what I mean? You're willing to give some benefit of the doubt. That's what you were saying, right? You're willing to extend yourself in order to get into that relationship, right? It's not trust is 10 centimeters, right? And trust it flows back and forth. It's up and down. Sometimes you trust more than others. You shouldn't expect to have the same level of trust with your family and friends as you do with your brand new next door neighbor, right? Oh, they have to prove their trust to me. No, it doesn't work like that because you don't get to start off at this level. You start off at this level, right? And then with time, as you show more of yourself, that's how trust builds, right? But it's the willingness, like you said, to go out and put yourself out there. But most people, I'm willing to bet, most people want that connection, about human connection.
Yeah, and now look at you've just teed me up about then trust in law enforcement. And it's this everything that you just said, that people want you to put yourself out there, to build relationships, to be a little vulnerable. And you've just described what people want from their law enforcement, from police officers, is just that. So it's so interesting to me that there is such a resistance. And we are a fickle bunch, we in law enforcement, because we also, we do that whole, you got to watch everyone's hands, right? It's like people are trying to kill me. So that's a different kind of trust when we were talking about just because you are showing respect or you are opening yourself up for, compassion or God forbid, vulnerability. It doesn't mean that you're not keeping an eye on everyone's hands around you, And so there is the two, are not mutually exclusive, right? And so, but it's just so interesting. The way that you just described human relationships though is exactly what people want from law enforcement. I love that.
That has truly been the gift of this work. Is I know if I didn't do this work, I probably would have the same stereotypes as everyone else, unless I went out of my way to get to know law enforcement people. I've had the absolute privilege of getting to know law enforcement leaders and managers and sergeants and recruits as human beings first, right? Who have the job of law enforcement, who have the profession. And being that fly on the wall and listening to all the stories makes the picture whole for me, right?
Yeah.
So that's what that would be my suggestion, is just show a little bit of who you are. Sometimes you're going to get disappointed, guaranteed, right? Sometimes you're going to get hurt. And then the other side of the story is you could have such an amazing experience also.
Sunny, did you have a preconceived notion about law enforcement before you started interacting with them at the museum? Have you learned and grown?
I don't remember having like a preconceived notion, except when you go by and if an officer drives by you, you're going to slow down, right? But I had not known an officer. I didn't. And back, remember, I grew up in the 80s. It wasn't the same. It was very different in terms of their presence, their reputation, at least in the area I grew up in. I grew up in San Diego. And of course, now I'm also married to an officer. So that brings a whole nother level of awareness.
Juicy nugget.
Oh.
Juicy nugget. And she and said amazing police officer have amazing offspring. So let's just leave it there and let our listeners kind of get.
Did you meet on the game show Naked Attraction? I bet you did. Oh my God. I'm just kidding.
Now I know what show you're talking about.
It's so scary. So, Sunny, I think we get trustworthy. We get trusting. We have to be trusting. We have to be vulnerable. Did we touch on trusted? Isn't that really, I've often said that our character is on full display with each interaction that we have with others. Our values are on full display, so we don't have to speak to our values. They're just on display as we behave. So trusted, did you put a finer point on that for us?
Yeah, pretty much trustworthy and trusting is your outcome is trusted.
Got it.
Right? None of that other
That's the
stuff means
consequence.
much. Yeah, unless you get the benefit of the trustedness, if you will. Because think about it. Take a moment to think. When you are trusted by a boss, a friend, a family member, your spouse, you act differently than if you're not.
Good point.
Right?
Oh gosh.
So
that is so big what you just said. That is so big because it's you sit up a little taller. I mean, and this is like that self-fulfilling prophecy, and living into, labels and expectations. But my gosh, I think probably the kindest compliment anyone could ever give someone is, I trust you implicitly.
That's true.
I mean, and it does. It makes you sit up a little taller. It makes you never, ever want to let them down. I mean, and that is a great lesson for a leader. Let's pause here for just a second, because that is a great lesson for a leader, because we have a lot of people. I have the great fortune of going into organizations and doing assessments, and what I have found is that officers are just like, our leadership doesn't trust us. They micromanage us, and it's so interesting is because the more that you give away, the more you get. And what I mean by that is by looking at someone saying, I trust you to do your job. I've put you in this position. Now go. You may do it a little different than I do, which is where we have to, put the micromanagers on notice, is people do things differently, right? But just to say, I trust you to do the thing. And my gosh, when you as a leader say that to your people, it's like you've just unleashed the skills, the talents, the ability. It's amazing what happens when you do that to a human. What a gift.
So imagine if you could do that to a community.
Right?
How differently they might show up. And so I always say that I think law enforcement has done a great job with trustworthiness and trusting, but have they ever surveyed their community and say, hey, do you feel trusted by us? Because I think that would be an amazing survey. Because if you're putting all this effort, money, time into building trust, why would you keep doing it without testing it?
Right.
You should be able to see the benefits of that.
And
are you?
And Sunny, what this is all wrapping around is this core lesson in the Leadership Institute, which is like the difference between preference and principle. Some of that is the principle is that unyielding, tested standard or truth. There's a statute, there's a policy that guides it. There's the gold standard, right? It waves, but it doesn't ever falter. The preference is how you get there. The preference is kind of stylistic. The preference is really you being truly you. And as Kristen used to say, bring your freaky flag. Just do it your way. Use your words. And you're bringing it to the principle. And the principles are so unyielding, right? They are the standards. So it's building trust to actually tell your people or to find them. Let's talk about the principle. This is really what we want to achieve. Now find your way to get there. And that then eliminates removes a micromanager and empowers people to find their way. And sometimes they find a way that they strengthen a system as a result of doing it their way, right?
Exactly. And here's an additional benefit internally, let's just say. Trust is a factor in psychological safety. So I've heard Kristen say on past podcasts, talk about feedback, the importance of feedback, right? And I will say that you're never going to get difficult feedback as a leader from your people without that trust, without that psychological safety. They may be holding on to gold nuggets, but you'll never get it if you don't build that trust internally with your people.
Oh, but wait, Sunny, every leader I know has an open door policy and they invite people to come in and give their thoughts and feelings and opinions. So I don't know what you're talking about there, leaders.
Yes, and they're horrible listeners, right? You can invite someone in, but they'll just sit there and tell you what you want to hear. I just think that candidness.
Yeah. And the moment that, people stop coming to you, first of all, they stop coming to you because of the way that you react when they do come to you. Either there's retaliation or worse. And this is what causes the disconnect. This is what causes, people to become apathetic, in their positions, in their jobs, which I think is worse. Give me angry any day, but gosh, the disease of indifference, that's the disease that we have to fight. But what leaders don't understand is that they create that environment of indifference if they completely ignore when their people come to them, or worse, that retaliation. But then what happens is people learn very quickly, I'm not going to voice my opinions. I'm not going to put myself out there because either A, nothing happens, I'm ignored, or, it's retaliated against. So, but it just makes me laugh so hard when every leader I've talked to says, I've got an open door policy. And then when I talk to the rank and file, they're like, oh, we wouldn't dream about giving our opinion. We've tried that before. It doesn't work. And
well, we don't like to be going to the principal's office either, by the way.
Yeah.
So the more authority and rank you have, the more you need to outreach. So that goes to what you were saying, Kristen, about you have to trust in order to get trust, right? You have to put yourself out there a little bit first. And think about it, with your rank and your authority, it's very hard to ask people below you to extend their trust first. In some ways, that is in your responsibility. To build trust is to put yourself out there first. And are you willing to do that?
And that's where you have to be vulnerable, right? So describe for us, how do you get folks to lean into these really tough, challenging conversations? How do you create space for them? Just like leaders would create space for folks in their organizations to dive into really tough stuff. Briefly tell us how you do that, Sunny. I mean,
Do I have to be brief?
Oh, no. Well, just tell us, Sunny.
So, I thought about this question because one of my colleagues, Grace, that I work with, introduced me to a word, and I think this will help. This is a dictionary definition. It's the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. It's an epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill sprawling deep underground. So how do we get people to go into those spaces? We have them tell their own stories. I am convinced that people are dying to tell their stories. And so by acknowledging and honoring those stories, we help them start by, we go to where they are, right? We start with where they are. How comfortable are they? That way you'll know. I mean, this is like the kind of golden rule of executive coaching too, right? You got to start where people come to you with, and then find the boundaries that can be pushed, that can be challenged, that can be nudged, if you will. So the kind of the belief that beginning where people need to begin at, and you only know that from storytelling. I often talk about storytelling being one of the most important leadership tools. So if I gave you stats around your agency, around your community, this is the arrest stats, da 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 da. Will that change people's lives?
Output
Not
versus
necessarily.
outcome. Output.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Right? But if you tell a story, you can move
Mhm.
people. People are moved by stories. They're motivated by stories. I mean, case in point, you listen to a Holocaust survivor, you can't help but think, oh my gosh, look at what their lives, the choices they were made. What does that mean about me? Right? It's very
Why?
storytelling will be inspirational.
But why is this so hard? See, to me, what you've just said is honestly, I think it is the key to unlocking the universe. It is the key to our divisiveness. Is that
Yeah.
this is what I say, and I always mess it up. But it's like it's hard to hate. When you're close up, right? We can
Yep.
hate from far away, but then when you lean in and you hear someone's story, and I think of, all of the prejudice that people have, the bias, and I tell this story. It was a relative of mine that was what did not like gay people at all. It was just not something he understood. It was not something that he would, quote, tolerate. I do not tolerate. That is a different lifestyle. And he lived in a high-rise condo, and one day his wife had surgery, and the two neighbors, partners, two men, gay men, started getting groceries and dropping them off, helping her after her surgery. And it was after that he said, the gays, they're really nice, and I remember
The gays. Is that what he said?
thinking it was like you like, this is like the most anti-intellectual that you can get, and yet that was the thing that moved the needle. They were kind to his wife, therefore they are kind people. But that equation could not exist in his mind but for a personal experience to
Yeah.
influence him. And it's actually sad to me that it takes that for someone to go, wow, there are so many different people living their lives just as you described, in different ways, and living and loving and caring for their tribe, right? And it's like, why is it that this divisiveness, that we can't see past our own anthill? Why is that?
I think change is hard, right? I'll take that back. Change isn't hard because we don't like routine, meaning you guys will go on trips all over the world, I have no doubt, right? You're not going to the same place every day, every time. But people don't like to be controlled by their change. So things that are mandated are a lot harder, right? And I get the need for a mandate. And it's like what you're saying, Sylvia, we could find a way for them to discover that on their own, right? Give them opportunities to hear other stories. Like Kristen, you're saying, it's that personal connection. It's really hard to hate somebody when you know them personally, right? But I feel like as a society, we've become more and more contracted instead of expansive. And so the more I feel like you're trying to change me, the more I'm going to dig in my heels.
Resist. Yeah.
Right. And so, Sunny, I want to take a little off ramp here. This totally appropriate. I mean, I want to dive into what keeps you really seeking to learn more, increase your cultural competence, expand what you're learning. You're a voracious reader. So can you speak to this idea of your intellectual curiosity, your thirst for knowing more, and then kind of what do you read?
Yeah, so, I was a history major, and part of that was to hear other people's stories, right? I wasn't one of these people that enjoyed learning names and dates. Instead, I tried to focus on the choices that human beings made, right? And the circumstances.
More essence than detail.
Yeah, than data.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, bring it. I think it
Definitely.
resonates with folks.
Because, at the end of the day, there's probably, people talk about history repeating themselves, right?
Yes.
But I'll tell you, history is not some thing that repeats itself. Human beings make the same choices over and over again, which is why it's worth studying to say
The definition of
that was a
insanity.
good choice. Yes, exactly. So that we can, if we keep an open mind, keep the curiosity. I've always been a curious kid, right? I've always wanted to experience different worlds and different lives. And this is why I'm kind of laughing because I'm a voracious reader, but I read stuff that takes me off world.
Okay.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah.
Oh my God, you disappear into fiction? What's your
Yes.
genre?
In fact, oh, girl, I read so much um, science fiction, fantasy, romance. I read contemporary. I read historicals. I mean, I read it all. But I did want to tell you about one, because I started to think about like, what would I share? What interesting book? Have you all read The Measure? Nikki Early, I think. Okay, such an interesting premise. One day, everyone in the entire world receives a box on their front door, and in that box is a red string. Now, everybody gets a different size red string. Some are super short, some are long. Everybody in the world has gotten one. Nobody knows what this is about. So over time, they figure out that red string represents somebody's lifespan, your lifespan. So what do you do with this, right? And of course, this is a crisis now of who I am and what I want to accomplish, right, in the time span that I have. But what was really curious to me is how society responded. Like these people with short strings, insurance companies now drop them because they know they weren't going to live long lives, right? So there became dating sites for people with short stringers, right? Because you don't want to be engaged to somebody who's not going to live very long.
Why not?
I mean, like,
You guys,
I'd be getting like 10 short stringers. I'm like, I'll hit that later.
Sil, if you've got a short string, would you consider showing up naked for your first date? Would that be the exception? If it's a short string, it's like, listen, let's just cut to the chase.
Let's cold plunge and hey, let's do this. Okay.
So I thought that was a really interesting book, right?
Oh my God, I'm buying that right now. I'm buying that right now.
Here's what's funny. A couple things that are absolutely hilarious. So The Measure, I wrote it down with a freaking pencil on a yellow pad of paper. Kristen already Googled us and said this really. What the fuck is happening right now? So the other thing
I just texted to her and I just bought it on Amazon with one click while you were talking about it. And no, but still, by all means, get your pencil and your legal pad out and let's just see. Like, I am a person of action.
Hey.
And Sylvia will go to Barnes and Noble too. She won't bother with online.
Right?
She'll go to Barnes and get that paper.
Okay, so a couple things.
I love you so much. So
Ikigai is this kind of idea about life, and in the book, it's about Japanese and long life and approach to life. And there's a story about the rabbit and how we see our life and longevity that might just be interesting to overlay with the red string. And when we have Lieutenant Cold Plunge, Steve Gord, back on, we'll talk about the string and some other things. So I'm sure.
Okay. I saw that podcast.
Yeah, isn't it great? So it's so fascinating because you've just given our listeners a new kind of book to read, and it just may make a difference in the lives of somebody. Thanks for that, Sunny.
Oh, absolutely. But then now I have to tell you about my off-worlding, right?
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah, because, you opened it up. So there we go. If you're not already a fan of A Court of Thorns and Roses, that's the Sarah Moss series, be prepared to deep dive into major binging of a world that you cannot get out of. It's like so amazingly
like pickleball. Hello.
That's a cult.
It's a cult.
That's a cult.
There is a cult.
A world you can't escape. Thank you. Okay.
I can't do that. I can't recommend. You can't leave my recommendation without giving you a book that is extra spicy, right? But hilarious. You'll laugh your way through. You'll laugh out loud in bed and wake up your other. So this book is called The First Grave on the Right by Dorinda Jones. And it is I'm not going to tell you much about it except for the fact that you should be prepared to snort water because you'll be drinking and you'll start laughing. It'll come out of your nose.
Here's the amazing thing. All of our listeners are thinking, Taylor who? Keep kicking her off and bring Sunny back. Sunny,
that's right.
You do very serious work and it doesn't seem you take yourself seriously. I think that's such an important attribute, and you are so appropriately named.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
you've known me for
I
many
was
years too.
just
So, yeah.
gonna say that. I was just gonna say your name it's perfection. I don't know if you've lived into your name or if your name lived up to you. I don't know.
Oh.
Chicken or the egg doesn't matter, but you have been so delightful to have on this podcast, and I have learned so much. And like you said, so there's so many deep conversations and so many light ones, but gosh, I just adore you.
Sunny, you gave us some
Thank
things
you.
to really think about. And I talk about how some of our listeners, will say, gosh, I had to pull over and write that down. Or, Kristen will say, it's recorded. You can just rewind it. But, you do you, boo. I have to kind of finish with this thing that's really come to light that reminds me of you. There is a word, kuleana is a uniquely Hawaiian value and practice, which is loosely translated to mean responsibility. And this word kuleana refers to a reciprocal relationship between the person who is responsible and the thing which they are responsible for. When I think of kuleana, I think of you, Sunny, because you have this unique responsibility in this space to get people to not only understand, but to demonstrate something that's very, very different and profound in terms of how we provide service and how we lead others. And I just want to thank you for consistently a big mahalo for living up to your kuleana. It's you're remarkable, Sunny, and our listeners, I'm thinking, are going to say a thing or two. They're not only going to talk about how when I drank, it was a sipping of coffee, and when Kristen drank, they heard the ice in the glass. It's plastic, listeners. We're going to get her to ramp it up to crystal, but
It's a hotel room.
Yeah.
I know.
We make this happen from
Yeah, sorry about
wherever
that.
we are. Sunny, so we often ask before we wrap up. So tell us what fills your bunny with substance? What is it?
You know what? Honestly, as I'm in this amidst these two amazing women, I really just think friends. Friends who are willing to uphold you, friends who are willing to challenge you, who are be emotional with you, and most important, laugh together and drink together.
Oh,
That's
gosh.
awesome.
Human connection. That's it. That's what we always come back to. Everything comes back to human connection. So thank you,
Word.
Sunny Lee-Goodman, for connecting with us today. It is such an honor to be in your aura, and we're grateful for you for showing up today. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Super good point. Kristen, you might have a question for Sunny.
Yeah, Sunny, do you make your bed in the morning?
Every day.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Sunny, you are one of us.
You're among your people. I even make my bed in a hotel room. You're among your people, Sunny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my God. We've never delved into that, Sylvia. So do I. Oh my gosh. I just want to make it easier for the people coming in to clean the room.
Yes.
I'm just like, if I just make the bed, that's one less thing they have to do. Oh my gosh, Sylvia, we are the same person. That is actually terrifying that you do that. Okay. But okay, this is good. Sunny, you are our tribe. You make your bed in the morning. That is good to know. Do you cold plunge?
No, but after listening to your podcast, I've been thinking about it for a week.
Yeah, no.
Like,
it's
I
gonna
need to get
consume
something cold plunge. Yeah.
We're sorry about that.
Yeah.
We are sorry about that.
No,
Yeah.
I'm
So,
not
all right,
sorry.
get cold plunging.
Cold plunge in the morning.
Next time we have
sauna at night. Huh?
Yeah, next time we have you on, we're actually, Sylvia's got a homework assignment to watch that game show, Naked Attraction, and your homework assignment is to cold plunge. So that's your homework assignment. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up today. Tad Madden produces this podcast, and the song you are about to hear was written and performed exclusively for our Hollow Bunny podcast by my handsome and talented son, Jake Zeman, and his wonderful and accomplished friends, Fabian and Zoe. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, like, review, and tell everyone you know about it. I'm not kidding, bunnies. Listen to me very carefully. we have learned that there are people who listen to our podcast, but they haven't liked and subscribed.
Come on.
And I know that you're well intended. You're well intended. You forget you're busy. You're busy cold plunging, making your bed perhaps, but we just need you to punch that like button because it just makes us feel good about ourselves, really. And if you don't like the podcast, what do you know about anything anyway? And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, or whatever you're calling it these days. And please, bunnies, keep filling your own bunnies with substance and continue to add substance to others. And I will add through human connection. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
When you look inside, what do you find? Are you content to fall behind? When you lose your way and you've lost your why, have courage and get ready to fight the hollow bunny. When the way ahead is covered in smoke and you're tired and you're scared and you're losing hope, you'll open your heart and your eyes to see a challenge and a question. Why not me? To fight the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all. And I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger. Failing forward and moving onward, doing the hard thing and the right thing, forever fighting the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. If you're tough on the outside but empty within, something's gonna crack, you've gotta start again. The monster